The cooler, the cooling coil.
Okay, welcome everyone. Let's call this meeting to order. It is March the 4th, 2020. Welcome to the Environmental Justice Community Partnership meeting. First of all, before I forget, number one, I'd like to welcome Julie Franco as our new committee secretary. Julie was in a previous life 2 weeks ago, my secretary. Now she got a promotion, and she is one of her tasks is the committee secretary for here. So any questions or anything like that pertaining to the committee, you can reach out to Julie. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
All right, it's been a busy night for some of us, a lot of us. As we all know, the election day was yesterday. Record turnout. I understand people stood in line 2.5 hours to vote. Had 10 days to vote, but they stood in line last night 2.5 hours to vote. But that's a great thing. That means the turnout was better than what it has been. And that's important for us, you know, as a community and what's happening in this world. I'm not going to dwell on that. Just want to say hello to everyone. Can we have an approval of the December 4th, 2019 meeting minutes?
We need a motion.
I make a motion.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Question? All in favor? Okay. All in favor? Thank you. Alrighty, that's attachment 1 if you needed to refer to it. Number 3 on the agenda is a review of our follow-up action items. Action item number 1 was to email the 2019 accomplishments and 2020 goals and objectives to the Advisory Council for review and to seek other items. We emailed that out on December the 4th. Number 2 was to email the Advisory Council the link to WHAM program website. Again, that was emailed out on December the 4th. Number 3 was to share with the Advisory Council how many community residents attended the 2019 EJ conference. There's a handout today, and we've got all that information in the handout. Number 4, Mr. Alatorre was to check on public records requested for Ms. Torado Plaza. The public records request was completed on December the 27th of 2019. Number 5 was to agendize presentation on auto body shops regarding compliance. Today's presentation is a compliance overview of auto body shops. Any questions on that? Any comments? Okay. Goals and objectives for 2020. Those were, are they available as attachments? There we go. Are there any questions or additions for those goals and objectives?
A concern / question / suggestion. I feel like the goals are sort of a list of things that you folks will present to us. And I don't know how to say this, but it feels like our role is, that's a list of things to be done, but that's not a list of goals, outcomes of, you know, why are we coming together and what are we hoping to achieve? What brings us here? And I'd like this to be meaningful for all of us. And I think if we have some goals with some teeth in them, that would be really powerful and helpful. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and thank you for that. We want that. We want your input on that. So suggestions, absolutely. Thank you for that. No, I'm gonna look at you. No, seriously, that's what we want. So any suggestions on these goals? You are right, staff driven, but we definitely would like to have your input on it.
I think at the very top, what I'm suggesting is probably leading that off with the input that we received from community members.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know if we look at the accomplishments, the top item is EJCP program input. So, like today I talked to Rebecca just as an example of art or other like videos that we can perhaps use for the EJ conference. So maybe just making sure at each meeting we have kind of an update and making sure that we get back feedback on programs that we're working on. I don't know how that sounds to you all.
Are you asking to set that as a goal?
That's what
Yes.
Okay,
So I want to just ask before we put it on there and see what your input is. Like, is that what you meant as?
I think that's a great example of I'm not sure how it should be framed or structured, but I think, where does it say? Maybe it's the top of okay, so our mission is to ensure that the partnership addresses air quality concerns of diverse communities. The goals of the council are to support your, or this group's efforts, advise EJCP on environmental issues or environmental justice issues, help strengthen and build upon AQMD's relationships and alliances in the community. I'm not sure what goals should go under that. I think it's hard because we are an advisory council and we are our role is, to the extent I understand it, is that we're supposed to provide feedback and sort of be a sounding board, sort of representing the larger community. So I'm not sure how best to frame that in terms of goals for 2020, but the way the goals are framed just felt very passive and not. I'd love to have more meat, but I don't have the answer as to how to go about that. So that's a little problem with my suggestion.
Well, even suggestions on what more meat, more teeth mean for you as in an advisory role.
I mean, maybe I'm totally brainstorming because I didn't think about this enough beforehand, but maybe goals like to ensure that we are, goals about the feedback, or maybe goals about our interactions with our communities and making sure we're bringing those voices back here. Maybe goals along those lines to make sure that we are fulfilling our roles of bringing the community's voice here. Maybe numbers attached to that. I don't know.
Sienna, you're relatively new
Yes.
to the process, so we're not going to put you on the spot right now for feedback. But this is interesting to me because I've been thinking about this. How do we, and I don't want to say make this committee, I don't want to use the word relevant, but more substantial, more, what am I looking for? Legal, help me, but we're on the same
Yes,
track.
I like the fact that you said relevant.
Yes.
That's very connected to what I'm
Yes, we're
trying
on
to
the
get
same
to.
wavelength
Yes,
here.
yes.
So, and I think brainstorming is the way to go. Elise?
I think also we have so many different things that are goals and events and conferences and activities that the Environmental Justice Community Partnership puts on throughout the year. So just having your input on what ideas you guys think the community would like or would like to see happen in those. And the same thing with our task force. They have so many things to better communicate with each other, but also the community. And maybe you guys evaluating those ideas, is this something that the community would want to see, or how could we improve it from a community perspective? So just kind of being that soundboard throughout the year to give input. I think that would be the ultimate goal and the reason why we, started the advisory council.
Yeah, I think even reflecting that here, I think that's a great point, and even just reflecting that here, because this is really, I think, a list of topics that will be presented to us.
That's the way it comes across.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, to ensure that we're providing feedback on activities, right, things like that we're,
Mm-hmm.
framed in such a way that it does feel more relevant, I think would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any suggestions? Caught you with your mouth full, I'm sorry. Sienna, what were you expecting when you came on board?
expecting like to be a sponge at first and absorb like what all happens here, how things are run, what kind of input I can have representing Torres Martinez, because I know we're often overlooked or things are not always as they seem. I know we get blamed a lot for a lot of the issues that we're experiencing, but it's not
Welcome
us
to
that
our
are doing
world.
the things, it's everybody else,
Yeah.
so. So I'm hoping to bring some education and some clarity to some of the issues that are affecting our reservation and the surrounding communities.
Good. Rebecca?
I think I'd like to support what Sienna just said and maybe making that, if that's okay with you, making that a goal, like identifying ways that this committee and the Air District can better support tribal communities.
I like that.
Well, and maybe making that broader, identifying ways that we can support you in being, how did you frame it again? Can you say what you said again?
Identifying ways that this committee and the Air District can support tribal communities.
Okay. Maybe identifying ways that we can help AQMD support our communities more broadly
Yeah.
as well.
Okay, I got you.
I'm liking it. Okay, this is why we do this.
So what I would suggest is that if you've been taking notes, I see Alicia, if you could, what we'll do is present amended goals for consideration, because this is an action item, would have to be passed. We will amend them and then submit them to you for your review. You could vote on them at the next.
meeting. But in the meantime,
Yes.
look at them and think about it, because this is your advisory council. So we want what you want. This is to help not just AQMD, but the community. This is to help the tribal, and we so understand what you're talking about when you say you take the blame for things that you're not even doing. We take the blame for things that we are doing. So we understand, we relate to that, and we should be able to make that work for us, for everybody included around this table, and expand it out. Because you're in the community, and you have first-hand basis on what's going on there. If I'm not real clear, ladies and gentlemen, forgive me. I went to bed at 4 o'clock this morning, and I really didn't go to bed. I closed my eyes. But this is what we need to have, is a discussion about this committee. It's 2020, the beginning, so let's do this now. So any input, really read these. We can reformat anything that's on this paper. We can add anything here. Send it to Alicia. Do you want it? You want that input coming to you? Send it to Alicia, please.
Myself or to Julie.
And we'll bring it back next time.
Alicia, would it work if you sent us what we've,
Or the draft.
Absolutely,
Yeah, and
what
then
we've
we
already
can react
talked
to
about.
that.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
like
that would
that,
be
so
helpful.
we'll email that out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So does that bring us down to discussion items? EJCP Advisory Council accomplishments 2019. Were those included in the packet?
They are.
Mhm.
I mean.
Page 7. The package.
Anyone have any comments on that?
We didn't have any comments, or that's what we did.
So some action item.
Number 6 is compliance overview of auto body shops. Victor? Good morning, Victor.
Good morning.
Can you announce for those on the line that are listening only that they can find the WebEx online and view the presentation online as well?
And it's on our website. For those that are online listening, the presentation could be viewed on our website on the WebEx.
Yes, our YouTube channel, we're on webcast.
No.
It's on the YouTube channel, AQMD's YouTube.
Oh,
No, 'cause it's listening only.
It won't pick up on YouTube.
They leave comments? Yeah.
Okay, Victor, go ahead.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Victor Yip, Senior Enforcement Manager in the Office of Compliance and Enforcement. I'd like to thank you for inviting me today to talk about auto body shops. I've had the privilege of giving talks in the past about the overview of the Compliance and Enforcement Program, as well as our complaint reporting system, which is the presentation I recently gave. Today, we're going to talk about auto body shops. I'm the enforcement manager over the industrial compliance group, so we oversee the inspections of all auto body shops. My colleague Sean Benager here is going to talk about the inspection process, and I will continue on to talk about typical complaints about auto body shops. Sean's been with the district for 11 years, and he's one of our supervising air quality inspectors, one of our experts in the industry as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sean.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. If you don't mind, I'm actually going to stand up. Presenting while sitting down just seems odd to me. And that way I can also point to different things on the screen as well. So I'm Sean Benager. I'm going to talk to you guys quickly about an inspection process that we do at auto body shops. So when we're out there doing these inspections, primarily when it comes to auto body shops, we typically see paint spray booths. So paint spray booths can be very small, like you see down here, or maybe they're doing some little small like products or things like that, or they can be incredibly large. So this is actually inside an airport hangar, and that's considered a paint spray booth. But more for auto body shops, what you'll see is the top two here. The one to the left is going to be a prep station. So they're going to be doing some grinding, sanding, and they'll be doing the primer coating in that particular area. And then when they're getting ready to paint the actual vehicle, they'll pull it and drive it into the paint spray booth. So there's a couple of rules that come into play here when it comes to auto body shops. One is 1151, and that's dealing with all of the coatings for the paint that's going onto the car itself. The other thing that we look at is if it has a heater. So depending on where you're at, if you're in the Coachella Valley, you probably don't want a heater because it's very hot outside and the car's going to be able to dry. If you're somewhere in like Orange County by the coast, it's going to be a little bit cooler. They'll put on a natural gas heater. So we'll look at the emissions coming from the burning of natural gas and apply our Rule 1147 and make sure those are compliant with our NOx limitations. So also what you see when we're looking at these paint spray booths. So the paint spray booth does not control VOCs. It does not control odors. It primarily is there to control overspray. It's going to catch the paint into the filters. So what we'll look and we'll want to see is these filters like this, that they're properly installed. They're approximately 2 inches thick, and that the air is getting sucked from the paint spray booth out through the stack, and all the overspray is getting caught into these filters. What you don't want to see is something like this on this side. So all the paint that's supposed to go into a filter is just being sucked out and getting thrown out into the air, and you could have some overspray issues with that. So that's definitely what we don't want to see. When it comes to these paint spray booths, they will need a permit from us. It is considered a controlled piece of equipment and is not exempt. The requirement to have a paint spray booth is not coming from us. So it's dependent upon your city or your county. Typically, the fire department will say there's some fire hazards here in coating operations, so you will need a paint spray booth. You can do open spray with us. We have permitted open spray operations. So it's really up to the city or the county on whether or not they're required to have a paint spray booth for their automotive coating process or company. Okay, so what other things that we look at is the paint spray gun. So a lot of these auto body shops have what we call high volume, low pressure paint spray guns. And the reason for that is because we want to ensure that the coating is actually getting onto the car or the vehicle itself. So we look at the transfer efficiency. So HVLP is one requirement that they have to have. So it's also good for the company itself. They want to make sure that they're not using an over amount of paint, which could also lead to more volatile organic compound or VOC emissions getting into the air. They're reducing the amount of paint that they're using because they have a higher transfer efficiency that's actually getting onto the vehicle itself. There are other ways for transfer efficiency, such as hand applications using roller or brush or something like that, but that's not typically something we would see in the automotive industry. When it comes to the coatings themselves, we do look at the VOC limits and apply that to our Rule 1151. VOC stands for volatile organic compounds. And when we look at the different types of VOCs, we look at the different categories of the paint themselves. So we also have different rules that apply to different other coatings. So what you see here isn't the limit that applies across the board for different paints. It really depends on the substrate or the product that they're coating. So we have one separate for wood, plastic, rubber. This is primarily just for auto body shops. So when you're painting a car, typically you start with a primer. And when it comes to the primer, the limit is 2.1 pounds per gallon, or 250 gallons or grams per liter. So what that means is every time you spray an entire liter of primer, you're emitting 250 grams of VOCs into the air. Or every time you're spraying an entire gallon of primer, you're emitting 2.1 pounds of VOC into the air. The limit for color is 3.5 pounds per gallon, or the 420 grams per liter. So when it comes to the color, they do a variety of different colors for vehicles, so there is a mix. So we will have to inspect how they mix their coatings and their solvents together and make sure that they're in compliance with these limits here. The clear, so you have your primer base down, and then you put the actual color of the car, and then you coat it with the clear so that it gives it that smooth, glossy type finish on the vehicle itself. So there's typically 3 stages. And then the last thing we look at is their cleaning solvent. So after they sprayed all their colors and their coatings, we make sure that when they're cleaning their paint spray guns or any other things that they had coatings on, we want to make sure that the solvents that they're using is in compliance with our Rule 1171, which is our general cleaning application. So we're also looking at the VOCs from any other types of solvents at the facility, not just the ones they use for coating. So we'll take a look at their facility and take a look at their storage. When it comes to general housekeeping, that also gives us a key on whether or not the facility is keeping up with everything that they should be doing. So we'll go in and we'll double check and make sure that when they do their cleaning, they're doing it properly and putting it into hazardous waste materials in cans with this 2 containment system. So you have one containment system here where the actual waste goes into, and then they have a secondary just in case it starts to leak. It'll go into this grate on this one and into a container on the bottom. So that's a requirement by hazmat. It's something that we look out for and that we can refer over to another agency if we see particular house cleaning issues. This is something that you'll typically see on how they store their coatings and their solvents. So they'll have several different colors, and then they'll have larger of the base colors of the whites that they'll mix with the different pigmented colors, which can give them the different variety of VOC content. And then we'll take a look at their paint spray guns as well. The biggest thing for us too is when it comes to all these coatings and their VOC emissions is looking at their records. We need to see how many gallons or that they spray of each thing and how they do their mix. So they'll have their white base coat, and if they want to make a certain color of blue, they'll add the blue pigments to the white base coat, and we'll have to see how they do their mix ratio, which is really going to tell us their actual VOC that they're spraying out of their gun. So for one of the biggest components in not just this inspection, but all inspections that we do is the record keeping that the facility is keeping. So they'll be in non-compliance if they don't keep any records at all, because we really won't know how much VOCs that facility is emitting without looking at these records. We can also look back at their purchase records to see how much they buy, but that's really not going to tell us how much they're particularly spraying in 1 month. As a permit condition, they are typically allowed 667 pounds of VOCs per month in terms of emissions. But in my experience in looking at these auto body shops, they're usually doing right around 20 to 30 pounds per month. Additional information when it comes to auto body shops, we do have exemptions. Again, I talked about the paint spray booth and its permitting requirements. It is a control device and does require a South Coast AQMD permit from us. So they have to have a permit if they have a paint spray booth. Again, the requirement for the booth is dependent upon the city or the county that they're in. Another exemption is if they're doing open spray, it's not automatically a permit is required. If they're doing water-based coatings, which is usually what we see out there, they're allowed to do up to 3 gallons per day, or 66 gallons per month of coatings before a permit is required. There is some solvent-based coatings out there that are still in existence that people still use, but they're higher in VOCs, so we do limit how much they can do in open spray. They still have to follow the limits that I showed you in the table, but they're only allowed to do 1 gallon per day or 22 gallons per month of the solvent-based coatings. There's some resins out there. We typically don't see them in the automotive industry. That's typically something in the marine or watercraft industry. But there is an exemption for gel and resin type coating. That's 1 gallon per day or 22 gallons per month. So if you see some marine style coatings at auto body shops, that's probably not where it should be. But there is an exemption if they're doing open spray based on these limits. When it comes to aerosol cans, if we see any aerosol can, no matter what the VOCs are on those aerosol cans, those are considered exempt. Professional auto body shops will not typically use a lot of aerosol cans, but if we do see them on site and they're in non-compliance with our VOC ratings, they're still exempt from our rule of 51. The other thing with 1151 is we have a possession portion of this rule, where if they're actually possessing a primer, a clear, or a base coat that is just in non-compliance with our rule, that's an automatic violation without even having used it. So if they're going out of district to purchase something from Nevada, Arizona, or somewhere else, just possessing that in their shop is considered a violation, and they can receive a violation for us for possession. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Victor, and he's going to discuss complaints and how they relate to the auto body shops.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. So Sean gave us an idea of what we look for during the inspection process, and as he mentioned, our focus during the inspection is really to control the emissions from that operation. But what does that really mean to your communities and the impacts that these auto body shops have on your community members? And a lot of those issues come up through our complaint system, where the public would file a complaint against the body shop. The primary concern from community members from a body shop really are odors. And as Sean mentioned, the equipment that is used at the body shop is not designed to control odors. In some very special cases where a company installs odor control, we see maybe a handful of those in our basin. But when we talk about odor complaints, we address those through another rule, which is our public nuisance rule, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Second to odors, we receive a lot of paint overspray complaints. We receive complaints about companies operating without a permit, companies conducting open spraying, and in some instances we'll get complaints that they're using non-compliant coating. So I'm going to talk about each one and how we approach those types of complaints. But just to give you an idea of the amounts of complaints that we receive, last year in 2019 we received a little over 10,000 complaints. And as you can see, for the past 5 years, we received over 10,000 complaints. The largest volume of complaints are odor complaints, and as you can see, we receive well over 6,000 complaints each year about odors. So, translating that to the auto body shops, we again investigate odors from a body shop and try to enforce our public nuisance rule. Some of the challenge to enforcing our rule against odors is that there are some criteria that need to be met. The first thing is that there needs to be a demonstration that the odor affects a significant number of people or persons in the public, and that the inspector verifies that odor with the complainants and traces it back to the source, which would be in this case the body shop and the specific process. As you can kind of tell with body shops, if they're painting, let's say, a quarter panel or a small part, these odors are fleeting. It's very short term. Oftentimes by the time we get there, the activity has stopped and the odor is no longer present. So there is some challenges that we face when we try to confirm these odors against the body shop. If these issues are regularly occurring at specific times, we can strategize the positioning of our inspectors to try to be close by when we know this occurrence is happening, and so that we can achieve a quicker response to these complaints and try to get the confirmation. But again, the other part of the enforcement of the rule is that a significant number of persons have to be affected. So oftentimes, if we get 1 or 2 complaints, that might not be enough to substantiate a public nuisance violation. We'll need 6, 10 people to complain at the same time, and our inspector needs to be there and confirm it with those people. So as you can tell, that it's quite a challenge to be able to substantiate that kind of violation. But it doesn't mean we give up on that. We're continuing to respond to each complaint. We're working with the companies to help mitigate that activity. They might be able to adjust the time that they paint. Other things that they can do to help protect the communities from that odor that is coming from their process. The next category is paint overspray. Usually we approach that by conducting an inspection. As Sean mentioned, our paint booth is really designed to capture paint overspray. So a complaint for overspray would initiate an inspection of the equipment. We want to make sure all those filters are in place and that there's no openings that this paint can be escaping from. Again, public nuisance does address, can be applied to paint overspray if we can prove that there's property damage. And also our fugitive dust rule 403, if we observe paint overspray or if we notice that they're doing some sanding activities where the dust is flying over their property line, we can address that with our fugitive dust rule. In terms of complaints about operating without a permit, that would initiate an inspection, and we would then look at to see if there's equipment that's unpermitted, requiring a permit with us, and we would take enforcement action that way. In terms of open spraying, we do have some exemptions that allow companies to spray in the open without a permit if they if they don't use up to a certain amount of coatings each day, and so that's verified through their record keeping. And then lastly, non-compliant coatings would initiate a facility inspection, and our inspectors would go in and take a look at their VOC contents of their paints. So I guess we're asking ourselves, what can we do about these activities, and how can we address these complaints? So one thing that we are exploring is an interagency partnership with other city agencies such as code enforcement, the fire department, regional planning, Department of Sanitation, OSHA, and also if a city has a particular municipal code that would require them to operate equipment or things like that. For instance, LA County or LA City, I think LA City does not allow any open spraying in their city. So when we receive those kinds of complaints, we can look to see if there's a municipal code, and then which would require them to install a paint booth. Then we would go in and require a permit for the paint booth. Through our interagency partnerships and our task force, I think we're part of an industrial use task force. Regional planning is interested in some of these facilities where they have a conditional use permit for the auto body shop, and they're able to look into some operating conditions under that conditional use permit, and if there's clauses in there that would prohibit an activity, then regional planning can get involved in. And so we've been addressing some of these complaints through that route to try to get reinforcements to help us protect the communities around us. And with that, we would like to mention again, if any of the community members are experiencing any issues with auto body shops or any other air quality issues, they can notify us through the 1-800-CUT-SMOG. complaint hotline. It's a 24-hour hotline. During business hours, they'll be received by an operator who can take the information down. During off hours, their call will go to a voicemail system where they can leave the message, and we have a standby supervisor to monitor that line and dispatch inspectors if needed. Alternatively, they can file complaints through our website, through our online complaint reporting system at www.aqmd.gov, and that's also a useful tool to send us the complaints right away. So with that, if there are any questions, we are available to answer anything.
Do the auto bodies receive notice that there is an inspector coming, or is it, do you randomly show?
They're unannounced, underage inspections.
Right. That's by policy of our division.
Where are the complaints coming from, especially the ones that complain about facilities operating without a permit and non-compliant coding? Like, how does one know if that's?
So what I've experienced operating without a permit, a lot of times, sometimes it's a competitor that will try to look into our public records against one of the facilities that are nearby. Oftentimes it's an employee or an ex-employee that just wants to report that they're either operating without permits or using non-compliant codings. Right. We do get some referrals from code enforcement officers, fire departments, when they're going through the facilities and they notice they don't have an AQMD permit posted. They'll notify us and look at it.
Interesting. Any other questions? How often are the inspections conducted?
Right now, we are trying to get to each facility every 2 years, and with competing priorities that can be more often or sometimes less often. Problem facilities will get more attention. Facilities that have a long history of maintaining compliance, we may give them a year break or something like that.
Any other questions? Sure.
With receiving the complaints, it looks like that chart a lot more. There's been a huge increase. Do we think that has to do with more shops or maybe just more people knowing about cut smog?
Oh, right. So this graph is the total number of complaints that the agency received. It's not limited to just auto body shops.
Oh.
So if you notice that rise in 2015, we think that in 2015 with the Aliso Canyon situation, we've received quite an influx of complaints, and that kind of rolled into 2016. And in the 2017 and 2018 years, we were kind of trailing off from the Aliso Canyon situation, and we were moving into the Paramount investigation. And lately, we've noticed an uptick in activity with social media, the Nextdoor app. There's a lot more communication going on in the communities about how to report issues and concerns. And like Public Affairs Department is doing a great job with outreach to these communities and spreading the word that we have this complaint line that they can use.
I also, I think you thought, I thought that this was for auto body shops. Do you have that data?
I don't have that in front of me, but I can get that. Definitely.
I think that would be interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? That would be good data.
Yes.
All righty. Thank you, Sean and Victor. We appreciate the information.
Great.
Lots of
Thank you.
information. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda, Valerie, is a presentation and overview on solar on multifamily affordable housing program.
Yes, and I'm going to follow Sean's with going to the front because I can't see people. Yeah.
It was the same one, just
Same one,
the
okay.
next page.
Same
Oh,
guy.
Valerie's, I'm following you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you very much for your time today. So I am Valerie Gonzalez. Sorry, just that's the way to stand. No, maybe it's Jackie. Yeah. Okay. So I'm here with the Solar and Multifamily Affordable Housing Program, which is for short, SOMA. And I know last time, I think mostly everyone except maybe a few faces weren't here, so I know I've spoken about the program a little bit, but just a program overview. So SOMA is a rebate program. So it's a program that has come out of similar programs like SASH and MASH, which is for single families as well as multifamily. But it is exactly like the name says, solar panels on affordable housing. The only difference with this program now, it has been refined a bit to give more direct benefits to tenants. So with the MASH program in particular, which is multifamily affordable solar housing program, that is a lot of the benefits there actually are solar credits went to the property owners, and so SOMA was actually built to now give it to the tenants by having tenants really benefit with solar credits coming off their electricity bills. So this program also has economic benefits to disadvantaged communities because definitely since these are for affordable housing, definitely DACs half of the time, it is creating access to solar panels, helping decrease pollution within these areas or these apartments that most likely would not have access to it for the property owner, since it is the property owner who would be in charge of putting the solar panels on something like an affordable housing building. So, and I'll explain a little bit more how those benefits actually are trickled down to the tenants. And this is a greenhouse gas auction proceed program. So those cap and trade dollars are being funneled in this way that are being taken, well, who is funding this program is actually the 5 utilities that I'll bring up on the next slide. And this is a $100 million annually 10-year program. So with a goal of 300 megawatts of generating capacity by 2030. And this program did actually launch July 1st last year. So we are in the 3rd quarter of the program. We've already seen a huge increase in applications by actually going waitlisted in. So here are the different utility territories that the program is where properties can use the program. And we've seen so Pacific Core up north, almost Oregon, PG&E saw a wait list within hours of the program launching, as well as Southern California Edison, which is, I think, the most relevant to everyone here. And also San Diego Gas and Electric saw a wait list. So those practically the entire state was waitlisted the first day with so many applications. And overall, so now for program eligibility, there are different needs of well, obviously to be eligible. And so we do require at least 5 units to be part of the property, so in affordable housing with at least 5 units, as well as have virtual net metering. So we do need to have the properties have their own meter per apartment, and this is to actually help with those tenant benefits to make sure each tenant is getting solar credits to their own electricity bill. So different, and if there are any questions at any point, I was trying to keep to 10 minutes, I'm going kind of fast, but please stop me at any moment. And so then the building does have to be an existing building or a retrofit in order to apply for it. If it is a new building, we at least need a certificate of occupation in order to be eligible. And so here, as you can see, so it's either located in a disadvantaged community, the building, and be a deed-restricted building, so affordable housing building. And if it is not in a disadvantaged community, then it has to be at least 80% of residents have to meet incomes or be below 60% of the area median income. So, any questions there so far? Okay.
Does that mean that mobile homes wouldn't qualify? Do they have to be like a stick-built building?
It has to be a deed restricted building, so mobile homes do not qualify. I don't know about mobile homes exactly, but that sounds more like SASH, single family, affordable housing program. So that could be somewhere that you looked, and Grid Alternatives is the lead on SASH in California.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So then program benefits. So number one, why are we here, air quality improvements. So definitely, as I've mentioned, creating more access to solar panels within properties that may not have access to them normally. And economic growth. So economic growth, this was can be tied in also with training and employment opportunities. So SOMA actually has a job trainee requirement. So contractors are required to have to train at least one local hire. Preference is actually given to someone who lives at the building. So in order to, and there's actually one of the local hires in San Diego here for a project, and so they are trained. So we're talking about people who have no background in solar. So creating opportunities for people who live within these communities has been a big part of how SOMA was created, not to just give money out to big contractors who dominate the space and already have their labor and employees, but to also bring benefits to the actual people who will then also benefit from the solar panels on their properties. And with actually we've had this program, we actually had this man actually even get a job offer. So this is the first building that's actually been under construction since launch, and so we're already seeing that this is trickling down. There's another job trainee, but he actually got a position with a different company. So we're already seeing a few benefits to local community members. And then tenant solar credits. So for affordable housing, there are different types of affordable housing, like under HUD or USDA, and where they have requirements like such as only 30% of income goes is the tenant has to pay, and that gets, depending on what the electricity bill is and what the rent is, for example, like it'll stay at 30%. So let's say they normally have to pay $300, but now with this solar credit, and actually the way that works is that where let's say $200 normally goes to electricity or utilities and $100 goes to rent. And so let's say with the solar credit, now it goes down to $100 in utilities that they have to pay. Normally, since it was 30%, the rent would go up by an extra $100 to keep it at $300. But with SOMA, their property owner isn't allowed to do that. So now the tenant's actually paying $200, and depending, whatever was offset by that solar credit, and the rent wasn't increased. So this is another way that the tenant are receiving direct benefits. And so far we've actually seen that 95% of, because actually with the program, the property owner can decide how much they want for common area and how much they want to allocate of solar credits to the tenants. So the tenants, with what we've seen like with the MASH program, the predecessor, which is actually still, I shouldn't say, it still exists, so not complete predecessor, but we saw that a lot of property owners were taking the solar credits for their common spaces. So with this program, we've actually required a minimum of 51% of solar credits to go to the tenants. And we've seen with applications that actually 95% of solar credits are going to tenants on average from all the applications we've received so far, which is a huge win. in why this program was created, because number one was the tenant is the most important part of this program, and that's who's getting the credit. So it was a huge win for this program, at least in the first 3 quarters. And in a way we actually incentivized that was by making that rebate higher depending on what would be allocated to tenants versus common area. So the rebate would be higher, and the higher it is for the tenant, it can almost offset the solar panel price, or for price altogether, by almost 100%, if not 100%. So making those solar panels free for the property owners. Any questions there? And so where are we? South Coast AQMD. So right now we have about 70 projects or applications started. So here is actually a little outdated. The green and red and yellow indicated like what was on a wait list, what wasn't, but now we're actually completely off wait list. We got refunded about 2 weeks ago before I turned in this presentation, so now we're completely green, where all applications are open, and we don't have a wait list. We do actually in San Diego, but not in Edison right now, so that's great. We're taking applications. And so majority, also great news, Riverside and San Bernardino have seen the most applications within South Coast AQMD territory, and a little less in LA and Orange County in general. So I don't know, any questions on that? All right. And so get involved with SOMA. The question came up earlier of why are we here type of thing. So thinking about that, I know I didn't answer at the moment, but now I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent. And the way I pictured this, or the way when I started coming to these meetings just as an audience member, I always heard of what other people were working on, and trying to make connections, and that community partnerships was very important in my head, and the way I pitched to be part of this and to keep coming to these. And so thinking of that and just how we become more aware of what is everyone's different problems that we're trying to tackle within our own communities, that is the way I see this advisory council. And so therefore, thinking about getting involved with SOMA, so if this is something that benefits your community, if you do work with affordable housing and then, or just tenant advocacy or anything like that, then, or looking for even jobs for community members who are looking at new industries like solar and being trained on that. So we do have different marketing materials for all our stakeholders. What I mean by stakeholders is the different audiences in our program. One being actually contractors that I didn't even touch today, but tenants as well as property owners, and then secondary stakeholders like government agencies and different even community choice aggregations, who I didn't mention, but if there is a community choice aggregation within one of the 5 IOUs or utility companies, then they're also eligible as well, as long as they have a VNM tariff, which is, like I mentioned, the different meters for depending on the unit. So, yeah, so we have many things available if you're interested for your community. Let me know. And yes, so thank you very much. If you have any questions, you have my information there on the this week's packet. And yes, any questions? Yeah.
I'll just say for those that couldn't attend, and for those of you here, I'll make sure to send the link, or Sylvia will make sure to send the link to everyone so that they can look it up themselves and they can get connected with the program.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
For IID, do you know if they have like their own program, or is there a reason why they're not included in the IID, Imperial Irrigation District?
My understanding is that, and I can confirm with you, but the 5 IOUs here are being required to actually fund the program. So the greenhouse gas auction proceeds are the, I guess, fees that are from these companies.
So this is from cap and trade funding?
Yes.
Oh.
So they are being required to pay, and I believe the IE irrigation is not an owner, investor-owned utility, and therefore are not required. That's why you don't see like the smaller, like even LADWP or anything like that. So it's just since, so that is the reason why. Yeah.
And I'm guessing that they are also funding the upkeep of these.
Yes. So the incentive amount is, which I forgot to put up here, but the incentive amounts are quite high, where it can completely pay off the solar panels entirely, as well as labor. But one of the requirements is that 20 years, there has to be a warranty of 20 years and for maintenance and products that the solar contractors place. So to make sure they're, and it's a very long application process with many requirements and inspections that actually we've gotten, that solar contractors are a little bit against, just because it requires so much maintenance and, but at the end of the day, we don't want botched jobs, so. Yes.
As at the beginning of 2020, my understanding had been that all new homes or residences in California, for the most part, are required to have solar. And it's occurring to me that maybe, I always heard homes/residences, maybe that was only single-family homes, because I actually thought this was already, not the incentive piece, but the solar requirement was already mandated. I know there's some backpedaling now regarding the Sacramento.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right. SMUD has gotten an exception, and so probably that's going to happen statewide. But so I'm wondering how this is different from that law. Does that make sense?
Yes. So with that there, it does have to be an existing building or retrofit. So
Oh, I missed that. Thank you.
So-
That's the difference. Got it.
yes. So
Okay.
new buildings.
Okay,
which-
thank you.
Okay. So yeah, yeah, we're looking at more older buildings and that, as well as, and this isn't supposed to either compete with things like community solar. Community solar is still something for that affordable housing may not cover, or no, that's not the right thing to say. But this is specifically for affordable housing, where it's a lot harder due to low profits or no profits with
Got it.
property owners. So
Okay, any more questions? Thank you so much, Valerie.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Keep in mind her contact information and pass the information along in your communities. Okay, next on the agenda is member updates, and let's take a moment to go around the table and do introductions for Sienna. We didn't do that in the beginning, so my apologies. But also member updates, if you have anything that you want to report, anything that's happening in your community, any events that are going on, please let us know. We'll start, since you're looking right at me, we'll start with you.
okay, so I know I already spoke about SOMA, but last week we did go off the wait list with new funding, so that is a great opportunity, which since day one we went on wait list in Southern California Edison territory, and now we are no longer there. So we do have millions of dollars in funding for solar panels right now, and every year we get refunded that $100 million. So right now for the first half of last year, we only got half the funding, and now we're got the second half for this year, so applications are open.
Is there a link available that folk can click on?
Oh, a link?
Uh-huh. You know, like an email link, like a internet link that they can click on for application?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so everything is, you can find it on our website to apply. The only items that we do take paper for is, which I didn't even get into, so there's two different tracks. There's one that is contractor led, that the contractor actually finds the property and makes all arrangements with the property owner. And then there's one where the property owner, who may not know so much about solar, doesn't trust solar contractors, they can apply for that. And we do allow paper first inquiry applications for that, where they just email us their interest, and we do have a dedicated team that is there for technical assistance to help them with any questions they may need before they actually decide to go with the program. So other than that, everything's on our website.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, going around the table.
No updates.
Okay. Lisa,
Let's see,
introduce yourself first.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Hi, I'm Lisa Hart. I'm with the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance, which is, the city of LA is divided up into 99 neighborhood councils, and we are working on bringing those folks together so that we can speak to the city with a united voice, and so that we can work with each other more effectively. As most of you probably know, LA has its own Green New Deal, and one of our efforts is to get each neighborhood council, or at least a lot of neighborhood councils, embracing and implementing the Green New Deal at the local, hyper-local neighborhood level. That sounds really fun, and it does sound fun, but it's hard. So we're continuing to work on that. We are also waiting for the city. Most of you probably know that the city of Berkeley last summer announced that in new buildings they would not be installing any natural gas infrastructure as we move toward building decarbonization, so that we go more electric and rely more on solar. City of LA still has not followed suit, and I keep hearing from my friends in the city that they're about to introduce a motion, but I've been hearing that from them for many, many months. So waiting eagerly for that, because we want to really get involved and support that effort. There is a motion that was introduced by Councilmember Koretz on parked vehicle idling, which some of us are excited about, and which the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance Advocacy Committee is supporting. And we've gotten in lots of conversations about this and the implications, and the gist at the moment is that it will probably not be very enforcement based, but will be really an education effort. And as somebody, I am personally somebody who walks a lot and who has always noticed and especially now with our cell phones and everything, people just kind of hanging out in their cars running, and they're on their phone. So if any of you guys do that, please don't. Or at least if you see me turn off your car, because it just drives me.
And tell people to not do it, to stop doing it, because I see people doing it all the time.
Yes, I haven't done that yet. I have a friend who did that when I talked to her about it, and she did not receive a warm reception from the person who she was admonishing.
It's okay.
Well, that's what she thinks. So yeah, that's part of it. Like, there's that tension about, I mean, when it was first announced, there was a lot of pushback on social media. Some people feel very micromanaged or are afraid of being micromanaged by the government. I think they just shouldn't do it, and then if they aren't doing it, they won't be micromanaged. That's my opinion. But we're looking at probably an education effort rather than a very strong enforcement effort.
I like that
I do
because see,
too.
I found when I say it, most people go, "Oh, I wasn't even
Yes.
thinking," or "I didn't
Yes.
know
Yes.
that was creating problems
Yes.
with the air." So the education piece is invaluable, and that's something I think all of us sitting around this table should think about taking back to our communities because
Yes.
people don't know.
And
And you sit in the carpool lane. Think about that.
Yes, there's a couple of things that have come up that at schools,
At
when people are
schools.
dropping off their kids, a lot of people are just sitting there idling their cars, and that's an issue. And I was been really struck. I mean, idling has been driving me crazy for as long as I can remember. But there's a woman in the environmental community in LA who said this had never occurred to her before this issue was recently raised to her. But kind of, I mean, we're all different, right? And so it just hadn't occurred to her. But now she knows and she gets it. So I think you're right. And we're hoping that we're right, that we just need to get people thinking about it. And my hope is that, I really think a lot of what we need to do is get people reflecting on their own behaviors and their own contributions to the problems in the environment. So if we can just start with that, then we can start actually getting behavior change. So I'm really excited about that, but it's going to be an interesting one and a difficult one. And lastly, we received a grant from LADWP to work on encouraging folks to get electric vehicles. So we're getting going on that, and we'll keep you posted. It's going to be interesting.
Thank you. Sienna, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sienna Thomas. I represent the Torres Martinez Desert Kuwait Indians in the Coachella Valley. I am an environmental technician focusing on air quality. So that's why I'm
You're
here.
in the right place.
Yeah, just like home.
Anything going on with you guys? Anything?
Just fighting so many different entities regarding like illegal dumps. I mean, that's like a huge issue right now, stemming from the fires and a lot of green waste. And we're just really concerned because summer's coming up, and as you know, our temperatures get really extremely high, and so, fire is always going to be an issue, especially with the amount of green waste that we're discovering all the time. Just new areas just pop up here and there.
Wow.
So we're trying to.
Oh, what is green waste?
Green waste, just like clippings, tree trimmings. It comes a lot from the agriculture that's out there, and also from the landscaping. And so.
Are you saying that that's being illegally dumped?
Yes, onto
yeah.
tribal property.
And why, I'm going to sound naive, I'm having a lot to learn. That doesn't sound that terrible.
It is when
they
it
burn
catches
it.
on fire.
Okay.
Either, somebody
Okay.
accidentally
Got it.
catches it on fire, intentionally catches it on fire, or it just combusts.
Okay.
Because
Or
of
Lisa,
the amount.
it's just, for me, real simplistically,
Yes, that works
in
for
my
me.
front yard, you're dumping your trash on my front yard. That's basically what's happening in the tribal lands. And then people are burning it. Can I say thermal fire? Those kinds of things are happening. And it's no fault of theirs. The land is theirs. That's it. But yeah.
So they
Yeah.
just oftentimes see like, oh, there's empty land next to my farm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go dump my stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people see it, so then you get, items like furniture and clothing, toys, oil, which creates brownfields. So then that's another issue too that we're discovering, is that there's a lot of, we don't know what kind of chemicals are out there.
So it's mostly people from outside the reservation?
Yeah, a lot of people think it's us dumping on our own land, but it's not. It's coming from the outside communities.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rebecca.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Zaragoza. I work for Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability in the Eastern Coachella Valley, and I focus on transportation, air quality, and climate change issues. But we also do work on affordable housing and water and other land use, environmental justice issues. And just as an update, I've been working a lot on the Salton Sea, and I'm sure all of you have already heard about that. And just recently, the state, or the California Natural Resources Agency, released their annual report on the status of the Salton Sea Management Program, which is their 10-year plan of rehabilitating the Salton Sea.
And they mentioned that they're developing a new dust suppression action plan as well, which includes additional projects that will be located on the playa of the sea to suppress that pollution coming from the area. And that plan was also released this month or last month, and we've been reviewing it. And we had a regional convening this past Saturday with community residents from all of the communities around the Salton Sea, where we presented this information and the new projects that are included in the action plan. And one of the things that residents said was that because the action plan is being developed in 2 phases, that all of the projects that the state identified that are located on the northern part of the Salton Sea, so in the eastern Coachella Valley, they're all in the second phase. And that's also an issue that we've identified in the Salton Sea Management Plan, is that most projects are identified in the southern part. And so one of the biggest concerns for the communities that we work with is that when is the northern part of the sea, when is the eastern Coachella Valley going to see that level of action happen sooner rather than later? And I mean, we understand that this is going to take a lot of time, right? It's a 10-year plan. But residents that we work with have been advocating for a really long time to make sure that the state is implementing projects a lot faster. They're already behind in implementing the 10-year plan. So we just want to get some answers as to how they plan to catch up with that. Residents are also bringing up the fact that because there are so many entities involved in the Salton Sea, different agencies, different jurisdictions, that there may be some lack of communication or collaboration, not just between agencies, but with the communities as well. I was invited to be a part of an advisory committee on a 5-year study that UCR is doing with community residents. And we've mentioned that to the state, and one of the community residents that is leading it, Conchita, who I'm sure you know, she's leading that project, and she mentioned it at the AB 607 committee. And she really wants the state to acknowledge that the communities are doing a lot of this work themselves and partnering with academic institutions and doing their own research and investigations. And so we just want to make sure that the state is aware of those efforts and that they're combining and leveraging all of that to see if that can benefit the Salton Sea work as well. We are also working, so Leadership Council also does a lot of public policy work, and in the past we've run bills on land use, and one of them was SB 2447, which was a bill that we ran last year or 2 years ago, which didn't pass, but we're trying again this year. And that bill is it has a different number now, but that bill would require developers to provide notice to the surrounding communities when an impactful development project is going to come in, like warehouses, just to make sure that the residents in that area are getting notified that there's a public process and an engagement aspect to that. So hopefully that goes well.
Great. You are busy. Lots of work to be done. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for what you all do sitting around this table. Any other questions or comments? Any other business? Any public comment? Having no public comment, the next meeting date is Wednesday, June 3rd, is that right?
Yeah, we need quarterly, this one.
That's right, it's
Yeah.
March already.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, next meeting date, Wednesday, June 3rd, wow. Please, Lisa, thank you again for bringing that up, because it has been on my mind too. So think about what she talked about. Those of you on the phone, please, that are listening in, think about our discussion on the goals and objectives for 2020. And please send in our input and comments and suggestions. And with that, we adjourn this meeting. All right, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
I don't know how you're standing, baby.
Oh my God.
Oh, yes, I have a question for Rebecca. I didn't want to sound completely done. Oh. You know what, he mentioned putting a splash page up.
Yeah, I
at
turned
the
it
end of
into-
Which I have it up.
I'm
I
on
don't
to-
know.
Oh, That's somebody.
But I don't. Hi. Hi.
It's good to see you.
Yes, we emailed them.
Yeah, email a lot, I know Boris
Leave
was
it not look like it.
emailing
Thank
you
so much.
about this program in particular.
Yes.